Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to World This Morning. I am your host Hajra Satti and joining me is my co-host Ahmad Nawaz. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. How are you, Hajra?
Alhamdulillah. So Ahmad, today is 27th of October and we know that's a black day in the history of the Kashmir and Pakistan. Every year observe this day because we feel that the freedom of our Kashmiri brethren is very much important, and it is one of the fundamental United Nations, according to the Charter of United Nations, it is one of the fundamental rights of the people who are living across the world, right, Ahmed?
Absolutely. I think the longest standing issue that is unresolved.
I'm sorry, Ahmed, I have to cut you out, but we have to go on a short break because...
We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to World This Morning. As we were just telling you before the break that Black Day is being observed today. Now, there are many factors that one needs to explore when you talk about the history of this day and also the events that have unfolded since the past 75 years, Hajra, in order to understand. And obviously, I always say that from this part of the world, you can only imagine the horrors that take place in somewhat isolation, as you call it, in one of the largest open prisons in the world. And you know, to understand all of this, and for our viewers as well, obviously we've got a package on the history of this very day as well. Why is it observed? What happened? How did the events unfold? Let's take a look at that.
When Pakistan says that Kashmir is an unfinished agenda of partition, it says this in the backdrop of history of Kashmir and UN resolutions on the issue. Despite being a Muslim-majority state and overwhelming support in favor of joining Pakistan at the time of partition, Maharaja Hari Singh trampled upon the will of Kashmiris. India's forcible occupation of the state of Jammu and Kashmir in 1947 is the main cause of dispute. India claims to have signed a controversial document, the Instrument of Accession, on 26 October 1947 with the Maharaja of Kashmir. Maharaja's fears of rebellion among Kashmiris in favor of joining Pakistan led him to invite Indian forces. India put forth a condition: it will only help if Maharaja accedes Kashmir to India, and thus the invasion of Kashmir began by the occupying Indian forces. There are doubts about the very existence of the Instrument of Accession. The United Nations also does not consider Indian claim as legally valid. It recognizes Kashmir as a disputed territory. The fact is, all the principles on the basis of which the Indian subcontinent was partitioned by the British in 1947 justify Kashmir becoming part of Pakistan. The state had majority Muslim population, and it not only enjoyed geographical proximity with Pakistan but also had essential economic linkages with the territories constituting Pakistan. As India began forceful occupation, Pakistani forces rushed to halt Indian advance. Several key areas of Kashmir were liberated from the occupiers. Looking at the imminent routing of its forces, India rushed to the United Nations to seek resolution of the issue at the Security Council. The UNSC resolution of 21st April 1948, one of the principal UN resolutions on the Kashmir, left the matter to be decided by Kashmiris themselves through a free and impartial plebiscite. Knowing the ground realities well, India never intended to hold plebiscite. It's been 75 years of India's brutal occupation, and the conditions under which the Kashmiris are living makes it an ongoing human tragedy, and the world conscience remains asleep. This is Ali Andaz reporting for PTV World.
So, Ahmed, in order to have a more enlightening debate about why there is a lockdown going on inside the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and how people inside that territory are resisting that occupation, we have wonderful guests in our studio. So, without any further ado, I would like to introduce our guest. We are joined by Sundas Malik, who happens to be chairperson of United Jammu and Kashmir Coalition. Assalamu alaikum and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thank you for having me.
We've also been joined by a Kashmiri leader who has been at the forefront when you talk about the advocacy of this very right, the inalienable right when we talk about it. He's also the chairman of the Kashmir Institute of International Relations, Mr. Altaf Hussain Wani. Wani Saab, Assalamu alaikum, sir. How are you?
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
And joining Wani Saab is Zaman Bajwa Saab, who happens to be Kashmir lobbyist and also human rights activist. Assalamu alaikum and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Assalam. Thanks a lot.
Right. Very interesting that, you know, this generation now, the new generation needs to understand the realities. This is a digital age. And I think probably there is more advocacy, but the understanding needs to be there. So, Sundas, first of all, historically, I think we need to understand that since 75 years, the situation has not improved. It has deteriorated, and we cannot shy from that fact.
Well, it's true, unfortunately, but I believe a more damaging process that has happened over the past 75 years is India's perception taking over the reality of what is going on in Kashmir. The optical illusion, as I call it, that India calls the Kashmir Union of India, is completely a farce. And we have seen that over the years, over the past 75 years, since 27th of October, and even before that, the murderous, heinous behavior of the Indian occupiers has not changed towards the people of Kashmir. As their claim was that after the abrogation of 370 and inclusion of Kashmir in the Indian Union, at least from their perspective, they believe that would bring peace inside Kashmir. But as you rightly said in your introduction, that the resistance for an independent Kashmir, independent of the Indian occupation, has not ended. And that belief in relief through accession to Pakistan has not ended. And I think that is the silver lining, as far as I can see, in the dark clouds of 75 years of occupation.
Right. Wani Saab, going to you, I would really wanted to ask you, so there is a very militarized religious tourism going inside the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Lots of tours, such kind of tours are being arranged and the identity is being changed and there is particular mantra, so moksha for the Kashmir. So Kashmir was a very predominantly a Muslim territory, but the identity is now being changed into very Hinduized identity. The saffronization is going on. Why is India doing all of this?
You see, for the last 75 years, India tried to crush the people's resistance against their occupation, which was a peaceful resistance. They tried to crush it through brute force, through military might and all that. They used all the armory they had to crush the people's will. But at the end of the day, when they found that they have failed to do so, they started a warfare, we may say legislative warfare in Kashmir, thereby abrogating the Article 370, 35A of the Indian Constitution, and thereby making some other arrangements like political engineering, like demographic changes, like the curbs on the freedom of expression and all that, when they did all this, in this package, they had one more thing, that was to change the religious identity, to change the political landscape of Kashmir, to change the religious landscape of Kashmir. And in this garb, in order to sell their normalcy mantra to the international world, to confuse the international world about the situation in Kashmir, they had arranged these such of tours, that is militarized tourism in Kashmir. On the other hand, when we see the Kashmir, there is no freedom of assembly in Kashmir. People of Kashmir are not allowed to assemble anywhere, to protest anywhere, or even a small gathering is not allowed. Even our Mir Wais Umar Farooq, who happens to be the head of the head preacher in Kashmir, he has not been allowed to give the Friday sermons in the mosque, and he is not allowed. But on the other hand, what they do, they get the Indians from the non-state actors from the India, and they arrange these cultural shows and all that. This is to change in a way the history of Kashmir, to identity of Kashmir, to Indianize the people of Kashmir, what they are doing, and they are doing it even on the borders, on the line of control, in order to showcase it that there is total normalcy. But when we go inside Kashmir, when you go to Srinagar, when you go to Sopore, when you go to other places, you see a total different type of Kashmir, totally militarized, no one is allowed to go out. And all this is being done by India in order they can paint on one hand a normalcy what they sell to the international community. On the other hand, they want to convey to the people of Kashmir that we are going to do everything because there is no one to stop us. Unfortunately, international community has so far failed to make India accountable of its crimes against humanity, though there is a wealth of information available in all international human rights watchdogs reports on Kashmir, and even the United Nations office reports on Kashmir. There is wealth of information available for that. But when India was not made accountable, they are arrogant enough to do whatever they want, and that's why they are doing. The main aim is to suppress the people's will, to ask the people of Kashmir that you are now the integral part of India. So it is, but as Sundar said, the resistance there is continuing, and the people are putting a heroic resistance against this occupation. They have decided that they were never Indians and they will never be Indians.
Will never be Indians. You know, hope is something that you can never take away from the people, and that's why it's very important to understand, Zaman Bajwa, that veterans of the Kashmiri freedom movement, including the late Sayyid Ali Gilani, Shabir Ahmad Shah, then we talk about Yasin Malik, Mir Wais Umar Farooq himself, have been at the forefront of this struggle. But how important was that youth element after Burhan Wani that came in and gave a new life to that struggle, where now the youth internationally started connecting themselves, lobbying for the rights, especially you know, when you talk about censorship of not just media but basic facilities like the internet, especially for the youth who were even deprived of their educational facilities.
Bani Sahab very rightly mentioned that there is a censorship in everything in Kashmir, and they tried to suppress in any way to suppress the people of Kashmir. But we have to give credit to the resilience of the Kashmiris and the well diplomatic forum of Pakistan, which is pushing this cause day by day. And I want to mention that the sacrifices of Kashmiris are the main aspect. They were not getting the world forget about this. And you know that during this lockdown and this COVID situation, and after 5 August, when situation was very hot there, and everything was disconnected, but the resilience of people and the youth of Kashmiris, they come outside on the streets, and they told the world about by their acts. They made the videos by their own cell phones and go outside Kashmir, and they put these stories in the world newspapers. And you saw many award-winning features of the Kashmiri journalists. They told their narrative and their story very well. So actually now the cause of the Kashmiris are leading by the youth. They are well equipped with the social media. They know how to deal regarding this issue on the modern norms of on the conflict. They are using photography, they are making the documentaries, and they are using the art to describe and to show their atrocities which are happened by the Indian forces. And Bani Sahib told about the UN efforts regarding this conflict. UN published 2 reports regarding this conflict, and the data which was collected by these reports were provided by the Kashmiris. So Kashmiris took this stance that they can't live together with India, and they want to their basic right to self-determination, and they are ready to do everything for that.
So the current wave is dubbed as a third wave of the resistance, and one can find the broader contours of it, Ahmed, back to the Burhan Wani, when he started using the digital media, the digital platform to resist that. And he was just posting his pictures with the arms, but he was dubbed as being, you know, someone who was against the state, and then he was martyred. And when we saw he received such a huge support from the people out there, because
a hero's welcome. Yes.
True. And we saw that how his janaza was being welcomed there, and it was a show of sign that Kashmir people are resisting against it. So there is an indigenous movement going on, and thus we would like to ask you, how are people responding back despite the fact that there is a digital blackout there, so as they should not cooperate or coordinate more better in the resistance? So what is going on in there?
Well, India has used many tools, including intimidation, including threat, including hope for a more prosperous future to the youth. Unfortunately for India, these efforts are always surpassed by their continued brutality inside the valley. Like you mentioned, Burhan Wani, he is one of many educated, well-aware individuals who felt that there was a need to resist the Indian occupation, whether it be through arms or through lawfare. But I think it is important to understand that as long as these citizens are risking their lives, getting a single bit of news out of Kashmir is a huge risk to not just the reporter, but to his family, his village. And this effort is always going to not fulfill its true intention as long as everyone who's outside of the Kashmir Valley, who has much more freedom of spreading this news, fails to address it immediately. Very recently, we saw that the Indian occupational forces set fire to Hurriyat leaders' houses and shops in Kashmir Valley. The news came out within minutes, but it was, as I saw, it was Pakistanis who were spreading this news far and wide, whether that be internationally or whether that be locally. And I think that encouragement of having 22 crore representatives being on your side further pushes the youth of Kashmir, who they might be occupied physically, but their thoughts believe that as long as these people stand with them, they have the power to spread the news far and wide. And they have done every single effort. We recently saw a young female journalist who was not allowed to board a flight to receive her Pulitzer. But the fact that she received that Pulitzer and it was recognized, her effort was recognized, that is a good sign for the people of Kashmir, and especially from the youth. Because as we see, the political resistance leadership, as you mentioned, Shabir Shah, Gilani Saab, Mirwais Saab, they have all either been under house arrest or in prison occupation. So I think it is up to the youth to not only understand that message, but to further carry it on. And then comes in the youth of Pakistan, which can help them spread that message as far as possible.
Absolutely. I think this rogue element and, you know, this sense of falsehood that India has possessed has really tarnished its own reputation as a secular state as well. As Sundas also mentioned, many major international organizations, even Amnesty International, offices closed down, suppressed. But Hajar Wani Saab mentioned a very important point, that this legislative war now, because when they couldn't suppress people with fear, that element of fear was eliminated from the people because of that, you know, impulse of freedom, movement and everything involved. They went to legislative steps to try to curb the identity of Kashmiris, and to in order to understand the revocation of Article 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution. We've got a report on that. We'll take a look at this report by Asiya Altaf in order to understand what has been happening since 5th of August 2019, and then we'll take it further.
It is clear that we have taken a position about the need for Security Council resolutions to be implemented and for effective de-escalation and dialogue linked to that, with another very important condition, which is full respect for human rights and continental freedoms in Jammu and Kashmir.
For 70 years we have fought the battle, and today we are supposed to be the culprits. The Article 370 or 35A guaranteeing the special status of the state was granted by Government of India. How we've been made from a state into a union territory? Are they going to divide people's hearts also? Our politics will continue to fight. What worries me is that what must be the ordinary man going through?
See, people of Kashmir have been dealing with these situations for 70 years now, and the last 30 years have been a situation of active war, where we have seen 6 to 10 people die every single day.
It's basically a constitutional coup. This is an attack on the constitution.
It was an important symbol for the Kashmiri people. It is a symbol that they were unique. They're the only state where the Muslims are a majority. So that symbol has been taken down, and I think that is something which is going to be a bit of a psychological shock.
Under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which India has ratified, the right to freedom of opinion and expression includes the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information. The fact that hardly any information at all
पान भी लड़कों जो चाइनीज यूर तलक्षी वो छाड़ान लड़कों की तुम गरी में क्यों गाइड थे नहीं पत लाइड सक पत लोग
New Delhi has ramped up its military deployments in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, making it militarized zone in the world. The serial brutalization of Kashmiris takes many forms: extrajudicial killings, incarceration, custodial torture and death, indiscriminate use of force, deliberate targeting of Kashmiri youth with pellet guns, and collective punishments imposed on entire communities. The Pakistani people have always stood by our Kashmiri brothers and sisters in complete solidarity and will continue to do so, no matter what, until their right to self-determination is fully realized in accordance with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions.
Well, there you have it, Hajra. International outlets, international community responded very seriously and immediately to the revocation of these Articles 370 and 35A.
So, but Ahmed, the point of the fact is that it's very important that we keep that issue alive. That is why we are having this show, because the news cycle moves on and their attention is diverted to someplace, another place, yes. Right? So, Sundas, I really wanted to ask you, there is a complete denial of the hidden structures of the violence. For example, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which has been there, and at least 8,000 disappearances have been there, and in 28 years, no one has challenged that, right? And we have seen political leadership, how, for example, the Gupkar group, the Mehbooba Mufti, who has been doing politics over the dead bodies there in Kashmir. But now, because their powers have been curtailed, how do you see different political streams in this issue over the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir there?
Well, I think mainly two different political streams exist in the Kashmir Valley. One, who are the power politicians who want a seat, who want a title, who want the power in Kashmir to run Kashmir, basically. And the second stream that exists is the resistance politics, which, as we have seen, that despite Article 370 and 35A being abrogated only in 2019, the resistance political representation has been silenced for years, and it has been done so with the intention of silencing the main issue that engulfs Kashmir, and that is the Indian occupation. As far as you mentioned about the Gupkar gang, we see that their outrage only comes out when they are not given what they wanted. It is not about the citizens of Kashmir. I think in the last general elections in Kashmir which were held, they were vehemently rejected by the people of Kashmir. So I don't think we should even consider these people as representatives, because the people of Kashmir Valley don't consider them as representatives. So taking their word on what the situation in Kashmir is completely, I think, a waste of time. As far as the disinformation that these people have spread about the Kashmir has done more disservice, I think, in terms of the perception regarding Kashmir than the Indian occupational forces have in the past 75 years. It is important that we understand that as long as people, whether it be in Pakistan and whether it be around the world, as long as they don't understand that Kashmir issue is not a dispute of political, it is not a political dispute. I don't even consider it to be a land dispute. It is a remnants of the 1947 partition.
An unfinished agenda.
An unfinished agenda. Yes. Exactly. So we, if as long as we see it in that context, and we truly being representatives of Kashmiris, we understand the UN resolutions and see that there are two choices of accession. And as we sit here today, the so-called representatives of the Kashmir, or as I call them, the managers of the Kashmir dispute, who are being paid to manage this as long as possible and not to resolve it. They have never mentioned the fact that in 75 years, India's so-called accession document that was signed with the Dogra Raja has never been presented, whether it be in the UN or at any international forum. So like every single perception that India has created, this accession too is a farce. And I think the international community, if it sees it in that light, and sees it truly as an occupation rather than just a dispute, I think the solution would be more readily available to the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
As far as action is concerned.
Yes, that's very important to understand that, you know, all of these steps, like that's why I say, you know, living in falsehood that India claims. And that's why, Vani Sahib, it's important to understand this legislative battle as well now, where it's not just about Article 370 or 35A of the Constitution, but it's about changing the demography of Kashmir, where now non-Kashmiris are being settled forcefully into Kashmir. The land laws that were present, where you could not buy land if you were a non-Kashmiri, have been completely changed. How important is this to understand and highlight this on all international forums?
Thank you very much. First of all, the question you posed to Zaman Bajwa about leadership, the Burhan Wani's era and all that, I want to comment on that. You see, this moment has been transformed one generation in the generation.
Yes,
once Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani was a young man, he started a movement, then Shabir Ahmad Shah, Masrat Alam Bhatt, Naeem Ahmad Khan and Muhammad Yasin Malik and others, they were young people when they started the resistance against the Indians, and so did the Burhan in 2000 when there was all normalcy mantra. Again at that time India said that there is normalcy all over in Kashmir. Then Burhan used the social media and all that, and then the younger generation joined him in that fray, and then we saw how it transformed the political landscape in Kashmir and the resistance landscape in Kashmir. Now what is the importance of this warfare which India has started, the legal warfare against Kashmir, is the constitutional warfare? You see, as in your report you mentioned that these guarantees were not, we did not demand that these guarantees from the Indian government at that time. It was the Indian government and their collaborators who decided this. 35A, which was actually the state subject law in Kashmir, that was during the Maharaja's period, and this at that time was for the Kashmiri Dogras and for Kashmiri Pandits. At that time they went to the Maharaja that there should be a law that the people from India should not come, other states should not come to buy land there. It was protection to them because they were the rulers, they were the elite. Muslims of Kashmir were at that time subjugated, they had nothing, no civil right, no political right, nothing, no land rights even at that time. So they decided it. Now After the occupation, when they started this mantra that now Kashmir is an integral part of India and all that, they wanted even add that. But at that time, the Legislative Assembly of Kashmir, which they formed, they said now this accord or this accord of accession is final, but then United Nations said no, it's nothing to do. No assembly can decide the future of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It's not the assembly in Srinagar or in Muzaffarabad, they can decide the future of the people of Kashmir. It is the people of Kashmir, they will decide it through vote. So they rejected it. Likewise, now in after so many years, it was a dream of the BJP, the Hindu fundamentalists in Kashmir, that they think that Kashmir is a Hindu land and this is their sacred land and it should be Hindunized. And they at that time, which was at the Jan Sangh president, he traveled to Kashmir for this abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, and he was arrested in Kashmir. He died in jail in Kashmir. But taking revenge from that, now the BJP government in 2019 took this step by abrogating these articles. Why they are important now? They are important as for now is that these facilitate that non-state state subjects can buy the land in Kashmir. Now India has already started that by giving domiciles to the non-state subjects. Even when this law was passed, 17,000 people were eligible at that time to get the domiciles. And now 3 years have passed on, so you have given the 5 years PN, or the man who has passed his 11th or 12th grade exam from Kashmir, he can get that state subject. And now the more people have assumed
illegal
that.
settlements.
Illegal settlements. No, illegal settlements are different thing. This is the first thing that you get a domicile, and by virtue of that, you are enabled to vote.
This is settler
But they
colonialism.
did now this the delimitation again. This is all that they have changed the electoral map in Kashmir in order to get their deserved goal that they want to put a Hindu chief minister in Kashmir, and by that give more representation to the non-Muslims in the Kashmir Assembly. Again, on the other hand, they give the powers to the Indian Army to take away the land. Before that, Indian Army would seek the permission from the local authority. But now, any Indian Army station officer can declare a land as a strategic land, and they can take that land, be that township, be that any land, they can take that land, and they can construct cantonments over there, even the residential cantonments over there. When you get more and more people there, when you get their families there, it has its own set of things with them. And along with this, now over the period of time, India, there's a report before to 1990, there were only 432 temples in Kashmir. Now they are going to construct 50,000 temples in Kashmir. For that, funds allocation has been made. What does it mean? It means that they want to change that landscape all over in Kashmir. They want to make more and more people attract from India to come to the Kashmir, to the Holy Land, and settle over there. This is settler colonialism, what we call in a wholesome package. It's a settler colonialism which they are trying to do. People in fast track, they will change the map in the assembly and then on the ground.
Absolutely. That's why I think, Rajara, we call it a fascist ideology that is prevailing in the entire region.
And adding more to this conversation, Ahmed, the Maharaja, the grandson of the Maharaja, who also happens to be Indian senator, he said in the floor of the Senate that my grandfather never signed the Treaty of Accession. Rather, he signed a defense pact, and that too for the 20 years, right? And India still has failed to produce that accession treaty on any platform, right? So I wanted to ask you, Zaman, we have seen that the indigenous movement, the resistance movement, has been using the language of human rights discourse. How much it has been helpful in resisting the Indian settler colonialism?
First of all, I just want to add some comments on the Wani Saab's comment that actually India is following the Israel settlement style in that. You said that in 70s there was a small Israel, but after that they just grabbed the land of Palestinians, and now Gaza is very shrinking day by day, and they are following that land. As in past they used the pellet guns style, they got this style from the Israel. So he is following that model to just change the demography of Kashmir. And you talk about the human rights aspect. Actually, now the people of Kashmir and the youth of Kashmir, they are writing about the atrocities and things these are happen in Kashmir, and they are narrating in every way. So world is listening. Now the thing is that we have to just bring our narrative with some strong aspects, and we have to highlight the humanitarian aspect. Actually, the trauma which are getting by this force, the families, the divided families situation, as well as the psychological aspects which are which
affecting
affecting the people of Kashmir, as well as it's just not the dispute of the land. Basically, it's a basic human rights. When a person is born, the first right is his religion, and after that his identity. India is suppressing and getting every right. So we have to beat this aspect, and as well as the world is talking about the sustainable development, and we can tell that the India as well as the United Nations, you have the sustainable development goals, and how you can achieve these goals in Asia when there is a war. People are dying by the hunger, and you want to gain sustainable goals.
Absolutely, unresolved agenda. Zaman, I think you put it very adamantly. Obviously, time is a luxury that we don't normally have. So, Sundas, finally, I'd just like to ask you, because you mentioned that disinformation campaign and everything as well. What's your final thought? How can things, be accelerated to a level where we on ground see stuff happening?
Well, I think I'd take forward what Zaman was just saying. When he said that Kashmiris are highlighting the humanitarian aspect of what is going on there. Of course, there is a humanitarian aspect. There is the Genocide Watch report which states that Kashmir is on the 8th stage of 10-stage genocide. However, I think we isolate the citizens of Kashmir as Pakistanis when we say it is just a humanitarian issue. The reason that they are being tortured, murdered, suppressed is because they demand that identity right of a free and fair plebiscite, and that is to accede with Pakistan. So I think the minute we accept that, and the minute we understand the roots of it, we disqualify India's claim of it being an internal matter. It is not an internal matter. There are 17 different movements going on in India which nobody mentions because nobody else is a stakeholder in there. Whereas in the Kashmir issue, Pakistan is a major stakeholder. And I think the efforts need to stem from that. And secondly, like I said, mentioned about the disinformation, when people spread disinformation, it is through the aspect that the citizens of Kashmir somehow have a choice of a free independent piece of land without Indian or Pakistan involvement. However, that is not true. Whether that be the first resolution or the 15th resolution of the UN or the UNSC regarding Kashmir, it has always been a choice between two nations. And as we know, India, rather than becoming a participant for the Kashmiri citizens in having a plebiscite, has become an occupier. So by default, I think it has failed and breached a contract that it signed with the UN, and needs to be dealt with.
Definitely. Well, Sundas, Wani Saab and Bajo Saab, thank you very much for joining us on the show. I think Hajar, a lot of insight that we've gotten into this issue.
That's really true, and I think India and Pakistan are both signatory to the Almaty Declaration, which clearly identifies that terrorism cannot be superimposed on the right to self-determination.
Absolutely, and I think finally I'd just like to recite certain verses that I obviously came across when I was thinking that the voice from Kashmir, I call it, what would be that voice? That voice probably would be, take my love, take my land, take me where I cannot stand. I don't care, I'm still free, you can never take Kashmir from me. Take me out to the black, tell them I'm never coming back. You can burn the land and boil the sea, but you can never take Kashmir from me. And that, I think, is the voice of Kashmir. On that note, from me, Hajra, and our entire team, it will be goodbye for now.